Hey guys, this is Chauncey from Session Stories, and today we're joined by LowHum, the creative project of Colin Deshay, an extraordinarily talented artist that's been making waves with a sound that feels both nostalgic and forward-thinking. His latest album, Terra Incognita, takes listeners on a journey through raw emotions and sonic landscapes, weaving together fuzzed-out guitars, hypnotic rhythms, and introspective lyricism. So thanks so much for joining.
Thank you. That was a nice intro.
Your latest album, Terra Incognita, I think it means unknown land. I had to look it up.
Yeah. It was supposed to sort of be like the metaphoric idea of the area of a map that is like the unexplored. So like the dark area of a map, you know?
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask how that concept like translates into like the sounds and themes throughout the album.
I kind of used it sort of metaphorically as like really this experience that I've always had since I was a little kid, and being born and raised on Oahu, or the Big Island of Hawaii. I was always kind of, my whole life always felt like I was adventuring into the unknown of the world, like because we're so isolated out there, and because, the type of music that I like to do and all these types of elements were so kind of unknown territory for like me as a kid growing up. And so it kind of always felt like it was just this perfect term that kind of explain so many different levels of that, right? Whether it's just like the physical idea of me leaving as a kid and traveling and kind of always looking for the unknown and being drawn to like the aspect of the unknown and the danger, and then even down to like more of the creative process of like myself and where I'm going as an artist and what I wanted to do. And this record, I produced it myself, which was also another kind of big unknown of kind of venturing into unknown territories. And we wrote, so there's a kind of a few collaborators in LowHum that always works together. And when we kind of write a lot together in my studio here in Los Angeles. But another element to the Terra Incognita thing was that we went out to Joshua Tree and stayed out in this house for like 2 weeks, and I stayed by myself a lot. And so it was a lot of darkness out there. And like, there was like, I would walk outside. There was essentially like two houses on this property. And you would kind of walk outside and it would be like pitch black. And then there'd be this like little door where you could see the studio lit up. And so just Terra Incognita kind of just felt like this, just kind of like perfectly encompassing term that just sort of felt like this perfect little stamp on this particular time period I was going through when making the record. And I'm pretty sure I got the term from Cixin Liu's sci-fi novel, The Three Body Problem. I'm pretty sure that's where I got it from. I read that whole series. If you were like around me around that time period, I was like I couldn't stop talking about it. I kind of felt like I stumbled upon this. This was before the Netflix series and stuff. And I felt like I found this like thing and I was like trying to share with all my friends. And yeah, so I'm pretty sure that's where I got the term from. I can't really remember exactly where, but like 90% sure I got it from that.
Yeah. You actually already answered kind of one of my other questions. I was going to mention that you self-produced the album, and that I definitely got hints of like ambient rock, and there's also some like grunge elements in there. How did your production choices evolve during the creation of this record, and did you maybe face any challenges?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, I kind of just told myself I could like do whatever the hell I wanted to do. And it's funny because I like even these alternative rock kind of things that I hit, which I kind of don't, I mean, there's maybe like a couple instances on previous albums that I've kind of touched in that area, but I kind of didn't really realize I did all that until much later when I kind of was like listening back, because I tend to really like allow myself to just be free. I try to operate more on like a subconscious level with my creativity than like this sort of like very overthought conscious level of approaching it. I'm more interested in kind of like allowing myself to go deep, and kind of pushing myself kind of like an athlete does, where you sort of like throw X amount of time at things and get to this fatigue periods where you kind of are operating in a dream-like state. You're kind of super tired, and I'm like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but like I'm just gonna kind of trust the process. And so I'm pretty sure some of that rock stuff was born in that kind of moment, because in hindsight, I'm like, I don't know, I didn't really try to do that, but now that I've digested the record and we've done some touring on it, there's definitely like more rock in it than it has in previous records. But I think at the end of the day, it's just sort of like, I have like a lot of these philosophical ideas around creativity and where it comes and all this kind of stuff. And I love learning about it and exploring the different ways that people have kind of articulated that thing. And so a lot of times I'm just kind of leaving it up to the gods, so to speak, to see like what comes, what I think it's David Lynch. Yeah, it's David Lynch who has that book, Catching the Big Fish. or catching, I think that's what it is. So it's kind of that same process of like fishing, I'm not really sure what fish is going to show up. So I just,
Yeah.
it was kind of an exploratory. I mean, a lot of that exploration was definitely coming out when I was out there in Joshua Tree and just sort of going for it.
And you're so isolated. Like it's just you and your thoughts essentially. So you have to focus on the craft.
Yeah. And I was like definitely out there by myself. I had sort of strategically kind of planned people coming and working with me on the record, people who had kind of like co-wrote some stuff, people who I've worked with production wise in the past. But there were definitely like lots of nights where I was like by myself, just kind of just trying to like basically let go and have fun. I'm really proud of it. That record, it means a lot to me.
Yeah. And the cool thing is like a lot of your songs, there is an element where you like mix dark synths, but then there's also kind of this ethereal sound as well. So my question to you is, how do you balance like contrasting elements to create emotion in your music?
I mean, the word contrast to me is pretty much everything when it comes to like the art. I kind of like this third record, it's the third time I've made this album and I've kind of done it on my own. And I sort of feel like it's the first LowHum record in a lot of ways because I very much know who I am and what my sounds are. And I kind of always find that my voice kind of tends to be the ethereal aspect where I can kind of explore lyrical things and talk about maybe some things that are a little heavier and like, but sort of coming at it from this light, sonically like a little lighter. Like I feel like my voice tends to be kind of a little like softer and maybe a little more like inviting than like, someone who's kind of projecting all this sound at you and whatnot. So I'm always kind of playing with the contrast of like instrumentation being big and bold and then like my vocals kind of being this sort of pad that like kind of balances out, always creating that contrast. And so it's all kind of, it depends on each song, like which kind of way it sort of articulates. But like to your point of contrast, I'm just sort of obsessed with that sort of ability to create contrast. And I love it in films and I love it in books and I love it in art. And I really see music a lot. Like I really see like the worlds. And so I kind of use my ears to see, which is a weird thing to say, but it's really kind of how I picture it. And it's really just kind of the name of the game when it comes to the tonal selections is how do I create contrast and whatnot. And I love bass. There's something about the way your body reacts to bass. Like I'm just obsessed with bass and I'm always guilty of putting way too much bass in like everything.
There's never too much bass.
Yeah, I just love it. I think it's amazing how it physically changes the body and like literally moves like the cellular level of your body or something, and I just have always been, ever since I began making art, I've always thought that was the most incredible part of the experience. So that's really where I'm drawing contrast, like the bass and my voice, and how do I kind of play with that world?
Yeah, for sure. And then I know you probably hear this a lot and have read it, but that your music is compared to artists like Tame Impala, but obviously your sound is still uniquely your own. So how do you incorporate your influences while still staying true to like your own sound?
Yeah, I mean, I think the truth is you have to write millions of songs. You just kind of have to keep writing a lot. I have been compared to his sound a lot. And what I've kind of like, my like mind is always kind of like thinking like, I wonder, because it's not really conscious. I don't think of my music as like when I listen to Tame Impala, I hear like the vocal thing. That's really probably where our sort of like our vocal ranges and how we resonate there and stuff. But I sometimes wonder if it's like this more of this kind of relationship to where the music was made from, where the human was from. Being that I know that he's from Perth, Australia, which is this like sunny, watery place, and me growing up in Hawaii, and then like us probably being roughly the same age. So the influences and like the worlds of synthesizers and like kind of how that was, because I started in punk rock playing in punk bands and stuff, and then kind of migrated over to this like synth world as I wanted to sort of expand my palette of experimenting and whatnot. And so I sometimes wonder if there's like this is really where the root of that merges, where we have those influences. I always like tell people if they've never heard LowHum, I'm like, it's kind of like Tame Impala, but with hip hop beats. Yeah. And like, that's kind of like where I see the like connection but also the split, like where I kind of have my own thing, but it's not really conscious. I'm not even really like the greatest music listener, really. I'm sure you probably run into some musicians who kind of do this a lot, but because I create so much, I'm sometimes like less inclined to spend time going vastly into other people's catalogs. I mean, there's clearly influences that I had as a kid, but you know, I sometimes chop up the influence kind of coming from like David Byrne has a great book about this like idea about music being, is it based off of your like, you know, your environment, or is it something that's kind of coming out of you genetically? I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but it was more like if you hear like there's a, like we put people in a stadium, and so we kind of did we create stadium rock, or was it vice versa, right? It's the chicken or the egg kind of thing, you know. And I think because I was born, I mean, I grew up literally in the ocean every day in the sun, and you know, I'm imagining that Perth, Australia is probably quite similar culturally, you know. I've never been yet. I hope to go there someday, but you know, I kind of see like that's where I feel like some things are really similar, being like kind of who we are. And at the end of the day, you know, it's kind of like an honor to be compared to it too, because I really am a huge fan of the art, and I really think that he's an incredibly talented guy. But at the end of the day, I kind of feel like the thing I always go back to is just like the message that is resonating from what I want to say, what inspires me. I always just kind of follow my instincts as much as possible, and that really is what leads my creative ability. Is like, at the end of the day, what's exciting to me, you know? And when I wake up every morning and I want to make a record, like what is exciting, and really trusting that.
Yeah. Also, you know, there's the idiom, what's the idiom again? Right place, wrong time.
Yeah.
Wrong time, yeah. But then you have a song, which is actually one of my favorites, and it's called Waiting for the Wrong Time.
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah.
I wanted to ask you more about the meaning there, because I at first I looked at it, I was like, maybe I'm reading this wrong. I was like, no, it definitely says waiting for the wrong time. Like, is that song about embracing uncertainty, or does it hold a completely different meaning for you?
I think like sometimes, like I don't always know like what I mean sometimes when I write songs, because I sort of feel like I'm exploring the concept conceptually even myself, like what is going on. But to the point of like Terra Incognita, you know, there's this song Blinders on the record. You know, I try to make songs that have like, I mean, I'm a massive Kendrick Lamar fan, and I love that his music can kind of speak on the surface level, but then have all these multiple layers beneath it. And it's kind of like choose your own adventure a little bit. Yeah. And so that is really the kind of lyrical approach I always want to go to. And for me, like this whole record, this whole music industry, technology has always been this massive fascination I've had from the beginning record, Room to Breathe, which was really literally about kind of the climate of technology. And, you know, I played with all these different concepts with I Don't Know Me Like You Do and Strange Love. And they're all kind of concepts. Room to Breathe, the actual single, is all about the kind of information landscape. So I'm always kind of just like riffing a little bit on what I'm just like, I like to be a perceiver of the world versus like a judger. Like I like my music to kind of like spark thought versus tell you what to think, because I just don't really think that musicians need to be doing that. That's a whole nother sidebar. But at the end of the day, waiting for the wrong time is just kind of being okay with knowing that shit comes and that bad things happen. And like, you know, sometimes the things that are happening to you that feel like they're not right or they're wrong in that moment actually end up being, you know, the thing that you needed the most at that time, you know? And so for me now in life, when I'm traversing my own experience, sometimes I feel like I'm actually like waiting for those moments to come where I'm like, things are good. Here comes that bad thing. I know it's around the corner, but instead of it sort of being this like, oh, why is this happening to me? Oh, why is the world doing this to me? It's almost more about kind of embracing whatever wrong thing is coming your way. And like, you know, I find myself kind of waiting for the wrong time sometimes, because I'm like waiting for that thing to come, which maybe sucks in the moment, but in the long run, it ends up being like the greatest teacher versus sort of the opposite, where it's like, oh, I have everything I want, you know, like actually getting what you don't want sometimes ends up teaching you more than anything else. So I'm happy that you love that. It's actually one of my favorite songs on the album as well, for like many reasons. Yeah. Even from the production standpoint and stuff. Yeah. I'm glad you called that one out.
Yeah, I really like that one. And then, so like, I think we've already mentioned it, but your music definitely has like this dreamy, transportive feel. So if you could perform in any like surreal or unexpected location, where would it be?
Ooh, definitely outside, night. LowHum outside at night, when it can be really loud and it has the space to sort of go, is like hands down my favorite experiences with it. Off the top of my head, I would love to play. I just love playing in nature. Like, I just think that's one of my favorite things to do is to be in nature. We did a festival. It was a small festival a few years ago, but we played outside in Joshua Tree, and it was kind of this like sort of DIY fest. And we were kind of like outdoor on this small stage facing these mountains. But when I played my guitar or when I sang or hit the basses, I could literally hear it like resonating off the mountains, kind of coming back at me.
Yeah.
And it was really dark out. We had this dope light show. And, you know, that kind of environment, I feel like, is where LowHum like flourishes, where it's sort of very silhouetted and you can't really, you're kind of listening, you're kind of seeing with your ears more, right? Like you're feeling it more than you're seeing stuff, you know? And that's kind of, to me, like my favorite scenario. There's a bunch of venues that I was super blessed to play with when we went on tour with Warpaint up and in the Roundhouse, like in London, was like an incredible place. I'd love to go and do like another show there more properly, but you know, outdoor spaces is always like my go-to though. Just any kind of outdoor space. They're always the most kind of like human, and the music kind of gets to like fly away. And I don't know, I really enjoy that feeling.
Yeah, we also went to a festival when I was living in LA a few years back. It wasn't really a festival, but it was a small festival-ish in Joshua Tree as well.
Oh, nice.
It was amazing.
Yeah, it was like, there's just something about the desert that's awesome. I actually don't really like, this is like a full transparency, but I don't really function well in a desert, like, because I think I was born and raised in Hawaii. I like water is really like, if I don't have a lot of water around me after a while, there's like all these physical ailments that will start hitting me. So like, it's funny because I don't really like love the desert, but I obviously like love everything that we all love about the desert, the vastness and the beauty and the desolation and stuff. But it's funny because I keep talking about the desert on this call and I'm cracking myself up because if anybody else was around me with my friends, I'd be like, we all know you don't really like the desert that much, but you seem to be wanting to spend a lot of time there.
Yeah. So another kind of fun question, but if you could travel to any era just to experience the music scene, like firsthand, where and when would you go?
100%. I guess it would be probably like I don't remember what year he was born, but I would love to see Beethoven perform. Like a 100, like no doubt about it. That would be the era I'd go. I think the 60s and, you know, was like a great time for a lot of music culture and stuff. But I just think Beethoven is the most, I mean, he's probably my favorite. He's probably written my favorite songs. And so, you know, his Ninth Symphony is like hands down my favorite piece of music ever made. I would love to see the performance, which I think is like, I'm always like kind of apprehensive if it's like just some sort of Hollywood moment that was made or if it's like actually real, but I'm like 90% it's real. But I would love to see the performance the first time they played Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, like specifically, because I remember that he had gone broke. He had basically gone deaf at this point. Nobody really had any admiration for him anymore. And then they performed this piece, and apparently he's conducting it deaf. And there's like a standing ovation, and they do multiple standing ovations and I guess these were only moments saved for like the royalty family. So like the military comes in or the police come in, and hands down, I would love to see that. Like that's just like, yeah. There's a couple of Bob Marley performances I'd probably put pretty close up there because I'm a huge Bob Marley fan, just as a human being and what he did for music in the world. But yeah, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, I would like to have seen that.
The after party would have been insane.
Totally. Yeah, 100%.
What else do you have planned for 2025? Are you releasing any music? Are you going on tours?
So I just got back from Paris.
Cool.
I did a week in Paris and I pretty much wrote a whole new album, which was not even really the whole intention, but it just happened. And I was able to work with some really, really beautiful French musicians. And so there's this like really cool album that's being born, it's mostly been born outside of the lyrics. I have most of the melodies and we did it in 4 days, which is,
wow.
I couldn't even really describe like how that happened, but it just maybe 5. Let's just say I did it in 5 days. There was one other session with a couple songs I might use. So that kind of came out of nowhere. And so I'm kind of like just feeling really good about that art. And I want to just kind of keep going down that road. So I'm literally working on it right now. And so I'm working on that. I have an EP that I have completed with a friend named Phil Simmons, who's a London-based producer that's out here in Los Angeles now that I've become real close with. We've just kind of collaborated and we're we're doing this EP that's sort of like a collab EP where we just basically threw like a couple weeks up at the wall and like wrote a whole EP, and I'm really excited about some of those songs. So that's going to come out in April. A no strings attached thing where we just, I love making art, so we just wanted to put more art out in the world. So that's going to be like the next releases that come up, and then I'm probably going to play like a little kind of underground LA thing just to perform some of those songs. Nothing that's really like LowHum songs, but just this like collab thing that we're doing. And this summer is kind of like when I'm going to probably start doing some stuff on the West Coast and playing some more shows and kind of getting back to like that world. We just did a show in Paris that went off really well. So I'm kind of itching to do like everything, but
Europe.
Yeah, I'm definitely coming back to Europe. There's a good chance I'll be in Hamburg again for some sessions. And so like I'm definitely trying to go back to Europe. I love it so much. And the music scene in Europe really like resonates well with LowHum. So I'm very like excited about trying to find the right partners to get out there and do that whole thing.
Like, obviously, I've lived in Europe, well, not obviously, but I've been in Europe for 10 years and then I'm American. But seeing both worlds, like how we consume music in a concert space here and back home, like I don't want to say too much to make my friends from the US upset, but sometimes it just feels like it's just appreciated on a deeper level here. That's all I'll say without getting too specific.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's, like I have had many conversations about this because by no means do I feel like Americans don't appreciate music on the same level, but I would say the real difference, and this is something I even experienced when I was in Paris this last trip. I was working with this half Syrian, half French music producer who, while we were in the studio, I'm going to butcher the exact term of it, but it's essentially like the state's ambassador of culture. And there's there's probably a bunch of them, but she was like one of them. And she came to the studio and it was when culture is institutionalized and it's not all about capital gain. It's all about capitalistic, measurements of how you bring value to art.
Yeah.
You just have a culture that cuts out a space in their daily life to appreciate culture and appreciate the arts, And I think in the United States, we just kind of don't have that type of culture. Our culture is valued with a whole different types of thing. And there's beautiful ways to experience the Western version of that, right? Or the American version of that. But it's clear to me that like when you go to the European states, and Canadians have the same thing too, because I've toured Canada and it's, there's a lot of the same sort of institutional government, cultural investment, and like when society deems something valuable because it is valuable versus its monetary value, the people respond to that, and the people respect it differently. So there's also a flip side to that. A lot of my friends that are from Europe who do music find that Los Angeles and New York and Chicago, like because we have no help, the hunger to do it is just of a different level, because there's you really have to fend for yourself. And so I've like had extensive conversations with Parisians and Germans, Danish, UK, Brits, the whole thing. And we always have great conversations about this exact topic because it isn't that people here don't appreciate music the same way. I refuse to, it's not that, but we don't have a society that values it the same way. And it's proof in the pudding in the way our government prioritizes art. It's interesting. I love playing in the US. It's hard, it's hard. And that's, I think, kind of sometimes the best place to see how your art really sets, and so, yeah. It's interesting. But yes, I want to come back to Europe like pretty much all the time. Yeah.
And what do you ultimately hope listeners take away from listening to Terra Incognita? Like, is there a certain like message or feeling?
There's always the same thing that I feel for every piece of art that I make. And it's my favorite quote by, I believe it was George Orwell. Yeah, George Orwell. Always kind of is like what I try to accomplish with my art. He says the best books kind of teach you what you already knew. It reinforces what you already know. That's really what I hope my art does for people. It's kind of like we're all on this rock, and at the end of the day, like we're all kind of experiencing the same things. We're more one than we're not. And I think that's like kind of ultimately what I always hope. And that's why with Terra Incognita, I really am proud of the idea of just kind of like venturing into the unknown and like being, a proponent of like take a chance on people, on yourself. Yeah. That's really ultimately what I hope the record kind of shares.
Yeah. And I meant to ask you this earlier, but what's your favorite song on the album? Like,
I don't know. It's like it's funny because like I usually can tell you which one is my least favorite. As the classic artist sort of like perspective. I don't really know. It's funny because it's kind of like asking a parent like which one's their favorite kid. Yeah, they're all kind of like they all mean a lot to me, otherwise they wouldn't be on the album. They wouldn't be there. There's a lot of songs that I get really close to and I'm just like, no, it's not that thing. So I think like Hints, I think is like a really interesting dialogue that I've had with myself. There's like lyrics on there that I think are really like I had that moment where I wrote, this happens sometimes where you write lyrics and then like a year goes by and it's like, how the hell did I write these lyrics that are so valid to my own life?
Yeah.
Like changing things. And there's a line about like family relationships kind of changing like the tides, and that really like affected me later in my life. And so that song sometimes just also live, I've been playing a version of it that's like really been that moment in the show where it's the first time that I really have like no band support and I'm just performing it by myself. And so there's a lot of that. Your Love is like a really good one. It's kind of like this random thing that feels like it should be on like a whole different record, but I just loved it so much that I just like, I don't care. I'm going to put this on the album, And then there's a whole bunch of like production stuff with like Meet Me in the Sky that I'm really proud of. And Only If You Say So was like a really fun song to make and really adventurous. And that one's been resonating really good live. And we shot this like insanely awesome video where we covered like 6 days across Hawaii and taking people to all these places that I kind of experienced when I was a kid. And so yeah, it's tough. They all kind of have like little sentimental values, but I think Hints at the end of the day probably pulls ahead with the lyrical and the sort of like where I'm at in my life. That one kind of hits me the most these days.
Yeah. I didn't have a favorite. I think I had like 5 favorites. I mean, like the entire album, but yeah, I definitely had like 5 or 6 favorites. So I can totally understand. And then, yeah, so I guess the final question is, do you have, any final words that you want to leave your fans or the listeners with?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, I just want people to find LowHum, and I hope they like, I'm happy that I've been able to kind of cut my own little world out in this whole thing. And like, there's a lot more coming. I have a lot more music and there's a lot more shows, and I really kind of feel like this project is kind of only been steadily growing. It hasn't been like the fastest growing, but it has never stopped growing. So I'm just excited to share more things that are coming. I didn't think I was going to make another album so quickly, and so there's like a lot of music that I'm really excited about that has just been made. So there's a lot more to come. So I'm really excited to get into like the new music and just basically share that with the world. And yeah, but there's no stopping coming from me. I'm going strong. So excited.
Very cool.
The sound of